In this lesson, I'm going to review interval and inequality notation, and we're going to then use this notation to state the range and domain of different functions. So let's begin. So in a graphical form, and imagining we just have like a one-dimensional graph, so this is just a line or along a number line, we can have either a closed infinite interval, and if we recall when we did inequalities in 8th grade and even in 9th grade, whenever you have a circle that's filled in at the tip, that's letting you know that it's closed, and we see that the arrow's pointing to the left, so we know it keeps going on to negative infinity. And in a case like this, an interval notation, we can denote it as negative infinity. So on the left, you always put the leftmost value or the lowest value. So it goes down to negative infinity. And then we end at A. The other thing I want you to pay attention to is the brackets. So whenever we don't include a number or we can't quite reach a number, we include a curved parentheses, so it's curved. Whenever we do include that number, it is a bracket. So it's like rectangular, we have that straight edge. So in this case, we have negative infinity to A, and we have these types of brackets because we're including A, we have the bracket, and because we can't ever reach negative infinity, we're going to put a parenthesis. So all your infinities will have this parenthesis instead. And in inequality notation, what we would have written is x is less than or equal to a. So this means the same thing.
Mom?
Our other option,
Mom?
is to have open infinite interval. So in this case, we have, you notice that our circle, it's open, and here we're going up to positive infinity. So it's still, and you can have this going down or up. They just chose to do it up. And again, we can write that notation. We know that our infinity, well, we start at b and we end at infinity. So it's b and infinity. And in this case, since we're not going to include b, we're going to put a parentheses because this is open. And we need to put a parentheses at infinity as well because we never quite reach infinity. And in this case, we put x is greater than b. And notice how this greater than and equal to, how it corresponds to the bracket. So whenever you have the greater than or equal to or less than or equal to, you know you're going to have some square brackets. Whenever you just have the less than or greater than, you're going to have a parentheses. And also, so yeah. So, and this is just a note, I've already gone over this, but it just indicates it goes on forever and does not end, in case you haven't seen these signs before, but hopefully you have. So the inequality notation, so numeric representation of data using inequalities to specify the inclusion and exclusion of numbers. So that's why we would use here. And here, the interval notation, it's just a numerical representation of data using brackets and parentheses to specify the inclusion and inclusion of numbers. So here, we're just using the inequality signs. In this case, we're using the brackets and parentheses. So here, the equivalent, -3 less than or equal to. So I mentioned that equal to part, you know you're going to have a bracket. So we start at -3, we end at 5. And here, notice that this is the less than sign. So we have that curve. Over time, you're going to find that this is a lot easier to write than the inequalities. I know you may be familiar with it and you may be like, oh, I don't want to learn anything new. But as we do more and more complex problems, this is going to be your friend. You're going to enjoy writing this way more. And you can already see for the simple example, this is a lot less to write than this right here. So I'm just going to go over different types of graphs. So we have the closed intervals, open interval, half interval, and let's just think about how we would write it. So remember, we're always going to have that A and B. We're starting at A and ending at B. So here, because they're both closed, we're going to have square brackets here, right? So square bracket A comma B. And this is the same as A less than or equal to X less than or equal to B. Here, very similar, we're going to start at A and B, but they're both open. So we know the difference is, instead of square brackets, we're going to have the curved parentheses, right? So we have parentheses A comma B. And here's equivalence, very similar. Only thing is you're not going to have that equal to part. So it's A is less than X less than B. And then finally, you can have one open, one closed. And here and wherever we have the open, remember we're going to still have that parentheses. So we'll have parentheses A, comma, B, and we have a bracket because this is closed. And this is the same as A less than X less than or equal to B. So before we get into the domain and range, so we know one way to denote our start and end of a domain and range, but let's just look at some notation because you're going to see these every once in a while. This is just keeping in mind, this means sets, if we ever see that. So we only have a specific set of coordinates whenever you see this, or information. It could be words too, or other objects. D represents domain. A capital R represents range. This little thing is like an epsilon. It's an element that belongs to a set. We have our positive infinity and negative infinity. If it's all real numbers, say there's no reason to include anything unless maybe it's not imaginary, unless it's imaginary, we can use this R, but notice it's like double. It's like a double line for the R's. If you want to just talk about integers, if the answer is all integers, you can use a Z. And if you want to use natural numbers, you can use N. And notice the difference between integers and natural numbers. Integers, they can be positive and negative, and you also include a 0. Here, natural numbers, these are just counting numbers, so it's going to start at 1 and work your way up. But they're also integers, but it's just from 1 and up. So here we're just talking about why do you think parentheses are used in interval notation whenever we have infinity and negative infinity instead of brackets? Well, I already kind of brought that up. So essentially we never quite reach it. So we can't put a bracket because bracket means it's included, but we never reach infinity or negative infinity, and that's why we include those brackets. We include, I'm sorry, parentheses instead of brackets. So now you're going to have a chance to practice. So you're going to have a few problems here. So you're going to take a look at the graph and pay attention to what they're asking you to give. So here it's saying interval notation. So you may see many correct answers, but they want the interval notation, so make sure you choose it. So I want you to kind of choose an answer and then check yourself. So here you can pull out the little answer tab to see whether or not you're correct. So you're going to do that for problems 3, 4, 5, and then we're going to move on to domain and range. So at this point, hopefully you went back and you